black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
And now we come to the great man himself, a man history records as being instrumental in the creation of America's public education system. Horace Mann was an American educator who served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, part of the American Congress. Horace Mann was the key reformer of the education system at the time. In 1837, he became the head of the newly created Board of Education in Massachusetts, where he began the work that would eventually earn him the title as the Father of American Public Education. After reading through the educational models of different countries, Mann finally hears about a particularly successful style that had been developed in Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany. The Prussian system had shown to be such a success for the government's purposes that, accompanied by a few other educators, Horace Mann travels to Germany to investigate. Upon their return to the United States, they lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted.
All in favor, say aye.
Interest in Prussia had also been growing in the northern half of the continent. Around this time, the Canadian Superintendent of Schools, Egerton Ryerson, traveled to Prussia in search of a new model of education. His journeys also included visiting Horace Mann in Massachusetts to further examine the system he would eventually adopt. George Brown, the editor of Toronto's Globe newspaper, was even quoted saying that Ryerson had successfully imported Prussian education into Ontario. During the next 30 years or so, a whole line of American dignitaries came to Germany to earn degrees. Interestingly enough, those who earned degrees in Germany came back to the United States to staff all the major universities. By 1900, all the PhDs in the United States were trained in Prussia. As the first secretary of the State Board of Education, Horace Mann promoted his new concept that the state is the father of children. He stressed that it was the responsibility of the state to ensure that education was provided for the child. A very noble idea, of course, but what exactly did he mean by that? And how did he define education? It seems like a very broad subject. It is a very broad subject. Education encompasses all of human history and all the knowledge we have gathered during that time. Not to mention, and perhaps most importantly, what we as human beings learn over our lifetime on a personal level. Horace Mann's 10th annual report in 1846 led to the first state law that made it mandatory for children to go to school. It was during that year that he supported the governor of Massachusetts in adopting the Prussian model of education for the entire state. How did he do that? The governor of the time, Edward Everett, as it turns out, was the very first to receive a PhD from, can you guess where? That's right, Prussia. From then on, it spread very quickly. Just after Everett installed the Prussian model in the state of Massachusetts, the governor of New York set up the very same method in 12 New York schools. Horace Mann's sister, Elizabeth Peabody, of the Peabody Foundation, saw to it that right after the Civil War, the Prussian system that was then being taught in the northern states was integrated into the conquered South. By 1900, most of the compulsory schooling laws that implemented the new system had been passed. From then on, every American child grew up under the Prussian system. So what exactly was the Prussian education system that everyone thought was so amazing that it just had to be adopted throughout the free world? To give you just a bit of background, in the 18th century, the Kingdom of Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany, was among the first countries of the world to introduce free and compulsory education. After the Prussians were defeated by Napoleon in 1806, it was decided that the reason why the battle was lost was that the Prussian soldiers were thinking for themselves in the battlefield instead of following orders. To make sure that this couldn't happen again, a new 8-year system of schooling was created. This new system provided not only the skills needed for the early industrialized world, such as reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also a strict education that taught duty, discipline, respect for authority, and the ability to follow orders. Elite children destined for higher offices went on to attend private schools, while the rest of the population had no access to the secondary education. They were destined for the working class. Through this new system, the Prussian court tried to create social obedience in the citizens through indoctrination. Every individual had to become convinced at the core of their being that the king was just, his decisions were always right, and the need for obedience paramount. In truth, the entire purpose of the system was to instill loyalty to the crown and to train young men for the military and bureaucracy. To do this, it was necessary to squeeze out all independent thinking from the masses. Influencing this new system from the beginning was Prussian philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte. Combining John Locke's view that the children are a blank slate and Rousseau's ideas on how to write on that slate, Prussia established an educational system that was considered scientific in nature. An important part of the Prussian system was that it defined for the child what was to be learned, what was to be thought about, and how long to think about it. In order to have an efficient policy-making class and a subclass beneath it, it was believed that one had to remove the power of most people to make sense out of the available information. In other words, critical thinking had to be done away with. Now, if you're wondering why the average person doesn't know that the North American education system is based directly on the Prussian model, it might just be because its original purpose was not designed for the good of the individual, but for the good of the government. The philosophy of Johann Fichte directly influenced the creation of the Prussian model of schooling, as he is quoted saying, "The schools must fashion the person, and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will." With quotes like these, you can see why his involvement is not well known. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. When this technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. In 1807, in a Berlin occupied by Napoleon, Johann Fichte gave a series of famous addresses to the German nation. Fichte spoke of the superiority of German people above all others. The content of these speeches was a catalyst for the Prussian education system and German nationalism. In other earlier works, he calls Jews a state within a state that would, quote, undermine the German nation.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent, when it comes to the history and the realities of our experience here in America. And that's what I try to do. One of the things that I like to use, and there's a number of reasons, for those of you who are familiar with the show, I like to use history to put a light on things that are going on in the present moment. And and one of the topics, like you saw in the video, and I hope it kind of surprised you as it surprised me when I first came across it, was the fact that this system that we call the American public school system came out of an incident that happened in the early 1800s, and it actually created a system that we took over called the Prussian school system. And I always incorporate history's past events in today so they could put a light on the present moment. Our public school systems are having problems. Not the teachers. Teachers are doing a great job under the circumstances. But the way the system is functioning right now, we got to understand it has not been working for decades. And it actually, for black people, it had not been working ever since the Board of Education. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the second show. But I want you to understand that one of the problems of the as I've seen it, and I've researched other great teachers, and I have teachers' friends, is that the system needs to be upgraded. But the system is running the way it ran 50 years ago or 40 years ago when I was going to school. And it's not like white, I understand that wine get better with age, but this system has not gotten any better. The same problems that inner city kids, the black and brown and poor whites have been having in the American public school system, is still going on today. So what was found to be problems last year, people are doing the same things anyway this year instead of innovating or saying we don't have enough money. But if you could spend trillions of dollars on a war, putting a couple of $1 billion into the public school system for the next generations of America who got to deal with the results of the decisions made today in the next 20 or 30 years, I think is an important investment. And that's what I'm going to talk about based on this. But again, I need to go into the past and let you know how we got this structure a little bit, go into a little more detail that the video kind of opened up. I got some images I wanted to express, and then I will start going through them, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. Let's go to the first video. This is the book that I based my topic on today. It's written by a school teacher, a multi-awarded school teacher who lost faith in the public school system. He was a school teacher at New York City. He passed, but his name is John Taylor Gatto. And he wrote this book, which I read, you know me about reading. It's an important thing. Weapons of Mass Instruction. Let's go on. Let me show you who this gentleman is. This is the, let's go on to the next image. Yeah, this is him on the right. This is Mr. Gatto, John Taylor Gatto. And he had these quotes that kind of struck me. I've come slowly to understand what it is really, what I really teach. A curriculum of confusion, class positions, arbitrary justice, vulgarity, rudeness, disrespect for privacy, indifference to quality, and underdependency. In other words, the public school system, who has not changed its format since the time of Napoleon, is structured so that either you get it as a student or you don't get it, and what the heck? There's no innovation, and we're losing millions of kids every year to this type of system that needs to be refurbished. I teach how to fit into a world I don't want to live in, and that's what turned him off. Now he actually, see the bottom, John Taylor Gatto. He was a teacher, New York State Teacher of the Year, and a 3-time New York City Teacher of the Year. So he's one of those teachers that dedicated their life to teaching, but recognize the system that just don't work. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, I don't think we'll get rid of schools anytime soon, certainly not in my lifetime, but if we're going to change what's rapidly becoming a disaster of ignorance, we need to realize that the institution, schools, very well, but it does not educate. That's inherent in the design of the thing. It's not the fault of the bad teachers or too little money spent. It is just impossible for education and schooling to be the same thing. Difference between education and schooling to be the same thing. This is one of his quotes. Let's go on to the next. All right. The particular utopia Americans chose to bring to the schoolhouse was Prussian. That's the system that was brought in the video you heard. That was I think in the 1830s or 1840s when a lot of people went over to Europe to study the system that it was established after Napoleon invaded Prussia. The seed that became the American schooling system in the 20th century style was planted in 1806 when Napoleon amateur soldiers bested the professional soldiers of Prussia at the Battle of Jena, which is another area of what is now known as Germany. When your business is renting soldiers and employing diplomats, extortion under threats of your solidarity, losing a battle like that is pretty serious. Something had to be done. This is from that book I just introduced you to. It's on page 131 of that book. Let me talk about who he is talking about. This gentleman. People heard about him, Napoleon Bonaparte, but people don't realize that he, in a way, with his military genius, when he defeated the Prussians, who were the preeminent military at that time, right? The 1780s, 90s. Well, going back to about 100 years from Frederick the Great, which was the Prussian leader who conquered all the little principalities that became later on we'll know as Germany. And they had this ego, and they were just as arrogant and uptight as they might. So you see, this kind of attitude of Germany not only started in World War I and World War II, went back another 100, maybe 200 years in Europe. And he, with his ragtag army of French illiterate soldiers, okay, fought in this battle in 1806, called at the Battle of Janney in what is known as Germany today. And he defeated the world-renowned Prussian soldiers, and they were shocked by this defeat. Okay, this is the images of that great battle in 1806. Okay, what's that got to do with the American public school system? Well, I'm going to get to that again. Let's just start with this tidbit, this disaster for the Prussians. Again, who did they blame? Did they blame the leadership? No, they blamed everyday soldiers who were the Prussian soldiers who was only following their commands. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. A generation earlier, and this is the person I was talking about, a previous enlightened despot, the name was Frederick the Great, had led a Prussian army and conquered and unified a number of independent German states. The Germany that we know today did not exist. It was a bunch of principalities back then in the 1800s and the 1700s, well into the mid-1800s. Same thing with Italy, same thing with parts of France. It was little city-states all over Europe, okay? So, and he conquered a bunch of that. But in doing so, there was pride taken in these armies, okay? And he deposed the French king and set up the first republic on the continent of Europe. We'll go on to that. It was what is called Greater Prussia, okay? And then came this guy Napoleon, okay, after the French Revolution, okay? Let's go on to the next one. The defeat subjugated Prussia to the French Empire until Sixth Coalition was formed in 1813. After the battle, Prussia undertook a military, political, and social reform to change what happened under the French. They were humiliated, okay, and they did this total social change because they believed, I think in the video they claimed that we had these ignorant French, illiterate French soldiers following this despot Napoleon, and we are these great, well-educated, or at least the elites, educated elite who descend from the great Frederick the Great, and here we are getting defeated. I mean, they were pretty much destroyed by this ragtag, illiterate French army, and they could not handle that, okay? So they said it was the soldiers' fault because they were thinking independently. And we can't have a population to think independently because we are the leaders, we are the elites, the nobility. That's who, and we're going to train them to think the way we want them to think, okay? And that's what they started to do when they started shaping the society. They wanted to start the school system. They started from the younger child. Let's go on. We'll see what happens. The most important and immediate reaction to Jenner was an immortal speech by this, I think he was a philosopher at the time, the address to the German nation by the philosopher Fichte. I don't know if I pronounced that word right, or the name right. One of the influential documents of modern history leading directly to the first workable compulsion school in the West. Compulsion, you must go. Prior to that, kids didn't go to school that much. They might have a teacher here, or they're taught by their parents. That was the way. But he came up with this thing that Prussian pride dictates that we must have a society of people that we train to think the way that we want. This is the genesis of the Prussian school system, and he was a very influential speaker. Because not only did Napoleon destroy the army, but he occupied Prussia for 6 years. Okay, so you had these illiterate French controlling the Prussians, and they did not like that. And once they got rid of Napoleon and sent him on his way in, I think, 1813, when they kicked him out, but they started with this gentleman said, no more, we shall do this. Okay. In no uncertain terms, Fitch told Prussia the party was over. Children would have to be disciplined through a new form of universal conditioning, not teaching, conditioning. They could no longer be trusted to their parents. Fitch said that education should provide the means to destroy free will. Okay, look what Napoleon had done by banishing sentiment in the interest of, let's go on, nationalism. Because Napoleon, the way he got his troops together, they had all these different things, loyalties to towns and cities, and that kind of separation. It was Napoleon who brought the sense of oneness. We are one nation. We are a great French nation. And that's what these troops were rallying around when they, for 13 years, kicked butt all over Europe. And that's why they vilified Napoleon. He had the sense. He got the masses, the rabble, to think as one. We are Frenchmen, not individual cities, towns, counties, or city-states, but we are one nation, nationalism. And this is what Fitch said. We got to think like that. But we're going to have a nation of thinkers that we want, okay? Working for the state, okay? Even laying down one's life to its command was the greatest freedom of all. Here is the genius of semantic redefinition. Semantic redefinition laid the power to the cloud of men's minds, a power later packaged and sold by public relations pioneer Edward Bernard and Ivy Lee in the seed time of American forced schooling. Okay, this kind of idea of nationalistic way of thinking, starting in the school system, was transferred over to the Americas. Let's go on to the next one. Education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. This is what the public school systems that were brought over to the United States that still exist today was based on, the Prussian school system. This was the seed of the American public school system, like the video said. Let's go on real quick. And again, of course, Horace Mann, and you saw in the video, went over to Prussia, and he brought this system into place, and he got the backing of another person went over to Russia. This next man, I think you'll see the governor of the Massachusetts, Edward Everett, okay? In fact, Edward Everett was the person that was supposed to was the person that was supposed to be speaking at the Gettysburg Address, okay? But it was done by Abraham Lincoln, okay? He was the keynote speaker, not Abraham Lincoln for the Gettysburg Address. Just to let you know, little sidebar. The Prussian system of schooling runs from kindergarten, that's what we get from kindergarten, to the 12th grade. That's Prussian. With students divided by age. That's why the different class, okay? Kindergarten, first, second grade. Teachers are considered qualified if they have the required certificate. That's Prussian. And there is little or no opportunity for students to explore a subject in depth, to develop a passion, or you just do what you're told. That's why, again, as I said earlier in the show, we are losing millions because this system still exists today. This is how you teach. This is the test you're going to take. We're going to teach you for this test. We don't care if you want to be a doctor, lawyer. You're going to get the same type of system and education regardless from the kindergarten to the 12th grade. Okay, and we'll talk about more of it in the second show. I want to bring some points out on this. Let's go on. The American intellectual class that did exist in the 1830s looked less and less to England and France for ideas. It was Germany that fed them. The German idea. Among the American Germanists was Professor John Tickner of Harvard. All these people were very influential. A lot of them, like you saw in the video, went over there and got their doctorates and they're the ones that were put in charge of these school systems throughout America. Let's go on to the next one. And then we come into the 20th century, and we have philanthropists like John D. Rockefeller, who poured a significant amount of investment into the educational system. He created the General Education Board at the unlimited cost of ultimate cost of $120 million. Okay, that's a couple of billion in today's money. Okay, and provided a major funding for schools across the nation and was very influential in shaping the school system. Yes, these same type of corporate entities that are doing the exact same thing today. Nothing has changed. Okay, who determine what's the curriculum? Who determine what kinds of school books are we getting into our school system? Who's determining who's on the school boards? Okay, corporate entity. It's nothing new. This is not a 21st century thing. This is something that's hundreds of years old. Okay, that's what I want you to understand. It needs to be changed. He didn't exactly conceal his interests and motives in being actively involved in promoting the widespread adoption of the Prussian type of educational system, and once stated that I did not want a series of educated people. I just want factory workers. In other words, I just want them to be educated. This is a quote. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. But he was about the money and the profit. We don't want doctorates. We want the masses. And this is what the Prussians was about. They wanted to get your children to shape the type of individual that will work in the burgeoning industrial age of the early 1800s, and also into the military, so that everybody would follow what the elite said they want. This is the Prussian system. It doesn't matter if you want to be a ballerina, if you want to be into science, or you have some other thing. You still have to go through 12 years of getting instruction from the system. Okay, I think I'll just stop here for this show, and I'll continue on. Well, I said, yeah, that's how much as I said. It was 1.27 billion. That's the equivalent of what John D. Rockefeller spent to establish the public school systems that we have today. We need to change. It needs to be upgraded. There's nothing wrong with the teachers are doing the best they can under the situation that they find themselves in. But we're still losing millions of kids because they're not interested in what they're being forced to study. And also what you're being forced, especially black children, they're not seeing their own images. They're not being taught how to, love books anymore. And if you see the kind of level of reading that people are doing, and I'm gonna talk more about this as we go on to the next show, we're going off a cliff when it comes to an educated society. The system that I was brought up under is the same system that my grandchildren are being brought up, and they're not really being educated. Education means to bring someone out of darkness, educare. That's where the word comes from the Latin root. And for that, I'll just stop right here and say until next time. And I always do this to the honor of the ancestors. So until next time, I'm Peace, Hotep. Bye-bye.